So Sheet Plus is an AI formula generator and explainer for Excel and Google Sheets. So this is a tool that is not intended for being integrated into either Excel or Google Sheets, but rather it's just a free tool to help with formula writing. Like many AI tools, it isn't perfect, but it can be incredibly useful for those of us that are just kind of sort of good at spreadsheets and need a little bit of extra help. Sometimes it's hard to remember formatting or all the different formulas, much less all of the different functions, which can be looked up online. But if we had a tool where we could tell it, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, write me a formula, and it just spits it out, that's kind of cool. So that's where Sheet Plus comes along. And this is not the only spreadsheet AI tool. This is just one that I found that seems to be somewhat helpful, but not without limitations. So Sheet Plus is freemium. The free version only lets us have 5 tokens a month. So you get 5 prompts a month. And the paid version is $5.99 a month for unlimited credits or unlimited tokens. I wouldn't say the paid version is worth it, but if you get stuck on a formula that just doesn't work, those 5 free credits could probably help. The tricky part is making sure your prompt is perfectly written. So the good news is they do have some best practices to help ensure that our prompts are written correctly. And for this demo, we're going to try and keep it simple to not use up all of our credits. So these are our demo prompts that we're going to try to use. So I have a sample attendance spreadsheet. It's really, really short. And we're going to ask for Sheet Plus to help us count the number of times a name appears. And then we're going to see if we can try to get some help counting the number of times a name appears within a date range. So this is our kind of messy sample attendance roster. And so what we're hoping to do with our first prompt is we want to count how many times John appears under our attendance log. So it's a pretty simple formula, but if it's been a while since I used Sheets, this might be pretty easy. Now, sometimes it can help us, and if we type equals and, start with a count, Google will help us. But if we're not 100% sure, we just want, a little bit of AI help, we can move over to Sheets Plus. So you do need an account. It is, you do have the ability to do a free account. So we have a couple things, even with the free version. We've got a formula generator, which is what we're going to demo in this video. There's also a formula explainer. So if there's a formula that we want to do, or maybe a formula that the generator gave us and we're like, I don't know what that is, the explainer could help make that make sense, hopefully. Do keep in mind that some of this is AI, but in the sense of this tool, it's all just from a database of the different explanations. So when I tested out the explainer, it pretty much gave me the same answer I could get under help documentation for Google Sheets. So let's do a formula generation. We're going to choose Google Sheets. And what we want to do is let's just count how many times John's come to class and see how that works for us. So we're going to do count the number of times a name appears. And if we type it this way, it will hopefully give us a prompt that we can copy and paste. Now, before we click Generate Formula, I do want to bring attention to this Best Practices dropdown. And this will help us before we click that Generate Formula button. As you can see, I only have 3 credits remaining. So some of these best practices, such as being specific as possible and being careful about what's within your ranges, so you can't calculate, say, the sum of a word and a number. That would confuse just about any tool. But instead being specific, so get the sum from a certain range if the value is blank. And so that's how we can get some help with some more advanced formulas. So hopefully our prompts are simple enough. I tried to follow their best practices without being super specific, but we'll add in some of our little details. So let's get going and create a formula. So this one's pretty easy. We got COUNTIF giving us a range and a name. So let's copy that into Google Sheets. So we'll put this next to John, and we need to set our range, which I should have been more specific for formula or for Sheets Plus. I said, counting within and let it know where the names are. So the range would be column B. So what we'll do, we'll do column B, full column, rather than B2 exclamation point. And then we need to tell it what name. So let's say John, hit enter. And so John's name pops up 3 times if we copy that down. And of course, now we need to change this to Amy. And so we've got some attendance count. So not too bad. Gave it an easy one and it did a good job. So let's give it a little bit harder one and cross our fingers that our prompt is good. So let's type it out first. So count the number, get my mouse out of the way, count the number of times a name appears within a date range. And let's check these best practices and say where the names are in column B and the date range is in column A. The start date is in, and we'll have our start date in I8. The end date is in J8. And let's cross our fingers. Let's check our best practices one more time. So count the number of times a name appears within a date range, where the names are in column B and the date range is in column A. The start date is in I8, end date is in J8. So if I was writing this from scratch, I would likely use a filter so within my formula. So let's see what Sheet Plus does. Crossing our fingers. So it's done it a little bit different, which is, that's the magic of spreadsheets. There's not always a right or wrong way to do it. I personally do things the hard way. I love the filter function when I'm trying to do things like this. So let's do our COUNTIFs, and let's see what happens. So we do need to put some ranges in there. So we're going to pick on John again. And let's paste this in here. Now, it's going to throw us an error because we haven't set everything yet. But let's plug in a couple things. So we got John. And so we got 0. So let's do our start dates. Let's do 10/1/23 through, let's cut them off at 10/5/23. So we got 2 within this date range. So from 10/1 to 10/5, so it stops here. So we got 1, 2. So it's right. So if we were to change our date range, let's say to 10/9/23, it should give us all 3. So let's switch it back and see if we changed this. Let's copy these. And instead of John, let's look for Zach. We'll change this to Zach. And I definitely screwed up a little bit, so let's copy our formula rather than copying and pasting and breaking things. So we got a 2 for Zach, and if we, let's try Brittany. Go in there, and that's a 0. But if we were to change this to 10/10, we would get 3 for John and Zach and 1 for Brittany. So, looks like Sheet Plus has done a nice job at helping us find a formula. Like I mentioned, I would have done a filter, which is probably more complicated, but also works. But COUNTIFs is definitely a simpler way than what I would have done. So Sheet Plus has helped me out greatly and saved me a little bit of time.